This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Yes, we got papers.
Yeah, I killed some trees.
That's not very nice.
It's our industry, though. I was gonna say, y'all remember how we gave them names?
See, they created computers to help me eliminate children. Then they realized you could print all kinds of.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the Legend Workshop. The percentage adjustment.
I'm picking, I'll just choose that.
Oh, okay.
Because that is going to be a show and tell.
Show and tell, okay.
Okay, what do we got here? Okay, so can I tell you real quick what I gave you and then y'all can talk about whatever it is on.
Okay, oh, there it is.
Okay, the asset listing report, and I just pulled precinct one, just so you could see that it gives the category of what it is, the adjusted cost, accumulated depreciation, and then the net asset value. Okay, so all the counties, buildings, lands, roads, of course, the roads have already been well depreciated long time ago. This tells you, if you go to the last page, page 11, and this is the management discussion, and this is the 2019 annual audit, because they're finishing up the 2020. A portion of the county's net position, 44%, reflects its investment in capital assets, which are land, construction in progress, building, equipment, and infrastructure, less any debt used to acquire those assets that are still outstanding. So when you get the annual report, it's not just cash, I guess, because I think that's what, it's all the assets. And then this that I gave you is what I did on my net, and I've got the backup paper with how it came up with the figures of what it could look like that we are left with at the end of the year. Because I ran a cash position report when I gave this to her, that's on the very last, that I took the revenue that we are budgeting that we're gonna collect, less the expenses that are left to be spent in the variance column. And then that's how I got the unencumbered balance. So, that's what I have for you. This one. This shows you how they do their cash apart.
This will be our ending balance, you think at the end of the year?
It's a guesstimate,
Yeah.
because I don't know what you're gonna collect.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't now, it could be at the year.
Yeah, end of this year, yes.
That's a good grade.
So that gives you a snapshot of December 2019 and what we had.
So on the cash position on the courthouse restoration, we still have $371,000.
Seeing where you are, so.
Yeah, on the cash position report.
For the back, court,
Yes, that's what it says there.
where's that at on there?
The last page,
It's on
it's,
this,
Is it what we already had, or is it in any of this new?
this is what is current.
the one
The
you
cash
just
position is what's current. It was current when I ran it. So,
So, just, I'm on this page right here, guys. I just want to be sure, because this may be where I was falsely believing that we were a whole lot better off in a cash position than what we may be in. This may help. As of December 31st, 2019, which is what this report is dated, we were at $5,963 of cash and cash equivalents. Road and Bridge had $2,561,000 of cash and cash equivalents. Emergency Disaster, $5,065,000, and then non-governmental was $1.7 million. So when you look at the investments, the receivables due from other governments and prepaids, $14,521,259. Road and Bridge had almost $6 million. Of course, disaster didn't change at $5 million, and then non-governmental 1.7. I think this, Mike, was when we were aware before the guys came along to understand. Wait a minute, y'all came in 19, didn't you?
But, look at I came back.
Okay, that's right. So this was in your first year. Okay. Now the liabilities. It may help for us to get an explanation of this. I think it would help me for sure. Because it looks really good here.
But this was 2019.
Yes.
So those receivables, that's gonna be the actual earnings tax, right? And other fees. That hadn't been collected. Is that correct?
Somebody other than me will have to answer that.
That's, it would be cash if we'd already collected it, right?
Should be.
You would think so, because they have a cash and cash equivalents line, right, as the first one, right?
So I would think that that would be like our budget of our projected revenue from our, the major part is our taxes that we collect. The $7.7 million. That's 97 or 94, whatever percentage you're looking at.
So would you interpret this information? There was, at the end of 2019, there was $5 million in general cash and cash equivalents. And there was $2.5 million in road and bridge.
Right.
For a total of $7.5 million combined between those two accounts.
That's correct.
Then I don't know the explanation of the emergency disaster, if it's a part of the general, and auditor can probably address that for us. I don't know.
She'll be right back. I think she's verifying some things.
I would think that would be a fund on its own, I would think.
I would too, otherwise, why would they have a separate column for it? And why would there be an expression of monies in it? But I think this might, from just our previous backup, is what my basis of belief was, that we have been and were in a good cash position by months of operation. For, at one point, my belief was that we were about $9 months to the good in cash position for operation.
I'm trying to figure out on that unencumbered balance, if that's, I don't really understand that, where that's coming in now. Oh, it's anticipated expense here. $3,965,000. So you take that out of the 5 million, and that's what you got. $2,183,000.
But when she gets back, since this is her report, maybe she can.
Yeah, we'll talk to her.
I just think it's helpful for y'all and me, of course, and all of us to be able to understand what do we have that we can put our hands on in the event, how much are we budgeting, where is it coming from, how much are we committing to provide for the officials to operate their offices, and is there any deficiency or surplus? If it's surplus, my suspicion is, on the report from earlier today, is that we had an estimated carryover of a little over $1 million. That helps us to understand it's $1,060,000 to understand that we can use that to build next year's budget. And then we'll levy $6,700,000+ to supplement that, added to all of the other revenue sources that's coming in to reach the $9.9 million budget. Okay.
Jackie, could you kind of go over this, that you give us here on the general fund?
I tried to highlight where I got my numbers.
Yeah.
So I went to the bottom of the revenue on the second page. That is what's left, because if you look at the budget at the bottom, it's 9.9. And the year-to-date is 9.366160. So that 535,701.42
Where you at with it?
on page 2.
2 of 14.
Oh, that's good.
Right here, Dan.
Right on the next page.
All right, go ahead.
So that's what we expect to collect to meet the amount we budgeted between now and the end of the year. So I added that in, and then I went to the end of the expenses in general fund, which is on page 8. And used the 3,965,448.25 as expenses, because that's what we have budgeted that says we still have to spend. And then this is what we would have, the 2,183,195.60 is what we have left. And I would, if you'll look back at this sheet.
Yeah.
The reason I'm pretty confident about the 2,183,000 is on this, because this balance sheet is cash. It's not, it doesn't have buildings, equipment, land in with it. And so if you look at the bottom where it says fund balances, and then you go to the end of that where it says unassigned, this report.
Is that in this stack of stuff?
No, well, I mean, I gave it to you.
Yeah, this one right here.
Oh,
Okay, start over.
Okay, so if you go to where it says fund balances and then go to the bottom of that where it says unassigned, and it's got 2,157,383. That is money that is unassigned, meaning it is sitting in the bank that hasn't been budgeted. And so that's why I'm pretty confident with my guesstimate on this unencumbered.
Would you call that reserves?
You could,
Okay.
And the reason, if you will look at the top where it says general, and it gives you the assets, the liabilities, the deferred inflows, and then the fund balances. All these fund balances, like the airport, rodeo arena, economic development, benevolence, waste collection, which we don't have now, countywide right-of-way, emergency operations, nutrition center, courthouse restoration, and legislative, are all funded by general. Even though they're in a separate fund, those transfers that I do annually is what funds those particular items.
And on that waste collection center, that fund balance is what pays for the
We
tax office and the
trans,
courthouse.
well, and
Or something.
I had transferred that to the emergent, we either voted in court to transfer it to no, I think it was to transfer it to the courthouse restoration, and then what money we were short, we were transferring from emergency disaster, if I remember correctly.
I know we sent some money over to the tax office from that disaster over there. I thought we sent.
And we could have, I'm not.
We did, we used some of that.
Okay, so if you go back to this one, and on precinct 1, Joe, you'll see that I've got circled in red, 9,000. The reason I didn't use what I had highlighted in the beginning is because you had 84,000 that you had sold equipment. So I didn't figure that needed to be calculated in it. You don't have to meet that kind of, revenue, so that's why that one's that way. And then the rest of them, it was done the same way as I did general. And that's why I brought it, so you can check to make sure that that you agree that my figures, like I said, it's a guesstimate. There's no way of us knowing exactly. I mean, we didn't know we'd be in a pandemic last year either, when we started the year or figured the budget. So does that make more sense, or has it confused you more?
Full cash position, or take cash position, I just don't understand the
Are you looking
amount
at,
left in the courthouse restoration. I know we gotta contribute some, but it seems like a whole lot in there, 371.
Joe, tell us where you are.
I'm on the, this sheet right here that says Tyler
let
County
me pull up the
Texas cash position.
software and we can see.
Or
So,
some
the
original.
one she just gave us.
Oh,
Yes, sir. It looks like this on the front.
oh, yeah.
Looks like we're-
She just gave us-
It's the
It's
last,
Texas
it's the last page of the cash
Right there.
position is what he's talking about. Let me get it logged back in.
Okay, thank you.
Was that a separate handout,
Oh,
that
yeah.
cash report?
I think it's in the same.
It was attached to what's highlighted.
We are gonna have that, $1 million coming in for, if the court decides to accept it for restoration.
That's gonna be reimbursement, yeah, you paid it.
Did you get a notification
No.
from TXC?
I just got that notification in the paper that we went, when we went up there.
But you haven't got an official letter from,
No.
Well, it doesn't become official till September 1st, so that's when so it's really not available technically until September 1st.
told you is that it was gonna be released
It
to
would
us.
be available to us to use for, we have to do
We do it and then get reimbursed. for it.
do an in-kind, match, but they're gonna allow us to use our ADA bathrooms that we did on our remediation. Above the remediation money can be used towards that match that we just spent.
Capital
Okay.
Yeah.
So the current expenditures or certain current expenditures
Yes,
are allowable against what they'll release next month.
that's correct, yes.
And then we'll have basically a credit of whatever the difference of that is against the million.
Well, in order to get the million, we have to spend like $1,173,000. But we're pretty close to $173,000 on the work we've done over here, so we should get pretty close to the $1 million without ever spending any more of our money. So they allowed us to do that. So,
Actually turned into kind of a blessing.
yeah,
Yeah,
so we're gonna have to spend the money sometime on the courthouse, might as well spend their money, and not have to spend more of our money.
right.
I hope so,
Since it's their courthouse.
yes.
Yeah.
Your point is noted, Commissioner. Let us not forget.
All right, we'll get to it.
Well, not just my point of saying that, that's $371,000 and we're going to have all this money coming in. You know, could we use some of that? You know, get to where we need to be?
Just so I'm tracking with you, are you saying
I'm there
against,
too, remember that? So,
just so I'm understanding, against what the increases that we know that we're gonna be facing?
Yes, sir. For our deficit is.
Okay.
In, general,
So that 371 is what we have right now left over out of that courthouse.
Well, that's what I was going, I'm looking at that, make sure the last payment that we made to the vendor finished the project.
Joe, I know you were present at last year's budget workshop, but for the rest of us, we had a document that Jackie had produced for us to be able to see like a 3-year track of expenditures and or budget versus actuals. And that first day, we identified about $300,000 that we budgeted and collected that didn't expense. So, y'all know where that went?
What's that? Oh,
That 300,000 that we identified that first day of budget workshop last year.
We left it in contingency, I believe, is what we said.
But contingency is only at 444,000. And we eliminated that part-time salaries line item, which was about 45,000. Because previously we had been at 400,000 for contingency.
How much have we spent on the courthouse remediation so far this year?
I actually have all that.
You got it.
I was gonna say, that's what I'm looking at, to see this construction guys invoice.
When we went up there, I went with the intention of begging for reimbursement.
Because we're quick, that's be a new project.
Jackie got it all figured up of how much we've spent, so I just got to track it down here.
Some of that money hasn't been collected yet either. Still waiting for some of that to come in, at 5% or whatever.
And I was curious, you know, that's a pretty good money.
Okay, the balance to finish, and this is including on this last payment, number 8 that we did, that will be submitted, is $175,468.07.
And that'll be pulled out of this.
Mhm.
Cut that back.
Is that the final payment or is there one more
It
small
says, it says
percentage?
balance to finish including retaining.
Okay. Is that from NT or is that from,
Well, it's, the architect has signed off on it.
okay, so that's going to NT.
Mhm.
And we're pretty close to it completing his fees too, if we're not already there. Architect.
The total finished price of everything for the construction guys is $1,219,718.91. Because we did have one change order.
We had some wire that we had to adjust, some not Ethernet, it is low voltage wiring, and then the air conditioning system in the courtroom. Those two. And then our ADA bathrooms that we did.
And we'll be able to get reimbursement for those.
We'll be able to count those as our match for the $1 million.
Okay.
Yeah. Or 10% or 15, whatever it is.
We have
We
that
can
right.
count that money, yes.
Oh, you do?
Oh, yeah.
That'd be good. Joe, I calculated that was basically $196,000 difference between the remaining amount and the $371,418.
That was good.
It's $195,950.27. Cents. $195,950.27.
But that would go back in general fund, correct? At the end of the year, if it's in that courthouse restoration and all that, wouldn't it go back in general fund anyway?
Well, yeah, that's why I brought this, so you can see. That's why she's including it, is because we transfer money to fund them. But you would need to if you're gonna use that money for something other than where it's sitting, you've gotta transfer it to where.
Ms. Lynn, did we get an average of, or did you get an average?
Yeah, not we, you did all the work. Thank you for that.
Read the next y'all back.
Oh, I didn't do that.
You're on camera now.
You have an open toe shoe?
Bro, did it mess up your nail?
Are you bleeding yet?
Oh, you knocked the paint off.
Watch it. Don't be
I think me and Mike both tripped over that one last meeting.
You know, I trip over all kinds of stuff nowadays. I guess I'm getting old. Tax year. Are you gonna explain this or we just need it?
She has to catch her breath.
Yes. That's what the percentage was at the end of the fiscal year. The tax comes out in like 2020, in October. But your fiscal year for that is January 1, 21, 20 through December 20. So that's by the end of December of the fiscal year, that's the percentage of that current tax year was collected.
So this is the actual percent of money that was collected that we could spend during
At
that
time,
year.
at that time.
So any other percentage of that we're past that budgeted year.
And can you give us-
Like 18, when the taxes were assessed in October of 18, but the start of the budget year was January 19. So by December 19, that was
December 31st of 2019, you collected that. 94%. And the next year, at the end of the fiscal year, which was 12/31/20, for the 19 budget hearing thing that we did, was 92%. So we only had 92% of the money come in that year, payments that we could actually use that year. Everything else, 2 or 3 or 5, or whatever percent came in later. Does this include fees or just this, the tax?
This is tax.
Just the tax?
Couldn't find it.
Okay.
Stephen, I suspect that the fees are just gonna be a minimal amount.
Yeah.
Especially on what would be roughly 6%. And then there's a certain percentage of it that's just totally uncollectible that winds up going to the tax sale that eventually will come back onto the books later on.
You know, a lot of times when they're sold at the tax sale, certain years have to just have to come off.
Right.
And then they get back on the tax roll and go forward.
So with the exception of the anomaly of 2020, at basically 93% rounded, that 94 is a good budgetary percentage figure. That's helpful to know.
Okay.
For whatever reason that my belief was that, yeah, we actually collected more. This is very helpful in that. Thank you.
Thank you. We better back that up to the 94 in our operation. Better back that up to the 94% collection.
Do your magic, Joe.
Oh, it's already written it out, already.
Jackie did her magic.
Jackie already did it. It's there.
I'll just move with it.
We don't have to use it.
Well, and one thing that brought the general fund balance down was we paid that $2 million into the retirement system. So that's another thing that brought it down from what.
That was in 17 or 18, is that when it was?
It was before,
It was before I came in, yes.
right, because I recall Jack and I having that discussion with Ralph at a conference several years ago. Were you there?
I was there, but I was at sheriff's office. Y'all were in the hallway.
That was in 2018.
Yeah.
Steve.
It had 17 or 18, I would think.
Was it legislative update?
Yes.
And I talked to him too.
It was still a good investment
Yes, oh, yeah.
because of the liability. It's like paying off a portion of your house.
Well, would it be possible with that 195,000 to, I mean,
Back up the difference.
make up the difference and then, that 75,000 for the next year go towards, whatever we have to do later on. Because we're gonna have that $1 million, to do a lot of the restoration on the courthouse. Just a thought.
As long as we don't go over budget for this year's budget, the rest of this year's budget. Something good happen there.
I say the one expense that we've had that really wasn't budgeted for was the rent that we're paying on the buildings where we're
Out of
relocating
the
to.
courthouse, yeah.
And I think we could add from contingency that we moved over from the part-time salaries into contingency and add it to that 195, not 196, and satisfy that deficit for this year. That way, we're not having to cover a hole.
Mhm.
Or we are covering a hole.
Covers both.
Yeah. And we're not putting that on taxpayers in the form of a 2-cent increase. And as a taxpayer and as an insider, I think that's prudent. If we're entrusted to handle this in the other's behalf, then that's what a prudent person would do. We have no idea. We're in such a volatile type of time and history, and we went through a period of about 7 or 8 years. It seemed like everything was pretty stable, and we were able to bank a lot of money. We came out of Hurricane Rita without being in the red when many of our counterparts were sucking wind significantly and they had deficits because of local expenses that they had to incur. We were still in the black. We were able to cover it again through another major disaster. And the contractor picked up stumpage, if I recall, ground it up. We turned around and sold the chips. We put the $500,000 in the bank from that, so it was a gift, and he didn't even get any kind of FEMA allocation because it didn't provide for stumpage. So the county would have had to have eaten that portion of it, as far as that goes. So we've been blessed.
I know there's been a time or two though, when we stayed, we went with the effective rate instead of dropping the rate to, I've really done that to keep from being in a bind later too. It probably made a difference.
And I recall at least one time, Mike, that we went just a little bit short of what used to be called the rollback rate. It's now the,
No,
it's the voter approval.
voter approval, yeah.
But we went right to the edge of that just to cover so that it didn't have to go to a vote public.
The no new tax rate is what we used to call effective tax.
But,
Right.
always kept-
No new revenue rate in and all. So where are we thinking of now?
Yeah.
Number one,
Rewind.
rate or rate, since we have more information.
Got some new numbers here.
I don't know, I mean, I'm still thinking. We need to be at 6.9.
492.
One of my concerns is we go with the no new revenue, and then next year we have values drop, and then we gotta come up with, anywhere from 5 to, 8 cents or something like that. It's a whole lot harder in my mind to justify that to the taxpayer. And I wanna be conservative as possible myself.
We were figured at a 95%,
Yeah,
so we need to look at that 94% and get to where we were at 95%. Get to the same number that you were at, if you want to go back to the same number.
And could we accomplish that with this courthouse
The other side.
fund, that 196,000 from there? I think that, you've got to look at that strongly, because if the public knew what we know and understood what we are trying to understand, would they say, hey, you had this, you didn't use it, you levied an increase in taxes to me, and now, ever how that impacts them personally, they're gonna say, you're taking more than you need. I just feel like that what I shared with y'all this morning about the increase to the hospitalization and the additional amount to the retirement, that's something that we're not passing along, and we're not reducing. We're not passing along to the employees, and we're not reducing it to the place that in other words, to the match that we're at. We're not going down to 1.75. So we're still fully funding to the fullest extent the retirement account. That's, $1,034 to a $31,000 salary position, as I look at it. The employee's not going to realize that, but that's the reality of it.
So I get to between the 94% and the 95% where we had it figured is $73,700. We'll be collecting that much less than where we were at before. Then if we roll that 155 over whatever that other
One
number
now.
was.
Whatever it was, yeah, it covered that, sure. And you figured that on the 6,492.
Yeah, 6492, yeah. So at our 94% collection,
Right.
which,
So about 6 million now, something.
from 7,2,067. I feel comfortable there, 6492.
We're not taking a vote of this today, obviously,
Correct.
but we're discussing where we feel comfortable and where we don't feel comfortable. And if my vote goes one way or the other, depending on how y'all are, then I don't feel comfortable supporting a tax increase of any kind, of any kind this year. I think our climate and the appraisals are such on the minds of everybody that we are not gonna engender the support for our roles here. And I think that we can live with what would be the effective rate of the no new taxes rate. And we can figure out our deficit internally. We've already done that. So if my vote makes a difference to any of y'all when it comes around, just know that I've come to that place of peace for me. And I certainly hear and respect what you're saying, Stephen, the 2 cents increase, but that's not where I'm at. I think that we can do what we need to do for this year. And then,
I don't know, if we did, but only come that much. I mean, we'd have to cut some stuff somewhere, or we go with that.
Mike, if we raise the exact same amount of money, which is what the no new taxes 0.6292 is, based upon the collection, then if we are covering our deficiency internally with what we've just been talking about as far as the courthouse money and then maybe some money from contingency, because we're going to fund contingency $444,000 based upon what it's already in the budget for right now. So we're going to collect 4 cents to fund that particular account. You see what I'm saying?
No, I didn't quite follow you.
Okay.
Trying to think of something.
Our contingency for miscellaneous is $444,000. It's a line item that we have to fund. If you look at it from just a tax levy, not all of the other revenue streams that help provide for the gap, that's equivalent to about 4 cents of taxation. I'm just saying we can take some of that out of there and just reduce our miscellaneous. I don't know how much we're expensing. Last year, Jackie did a very helpful tool for us. As I mentioned, it gives us 3 years of budget versus actual and how over that period of time you can see we're budgeting for things that we're not actually spending. So therefore you have carryover or leftover that helps to provide for our backup or our reserve or rainy day fund or how you want to call it. I just think that we are in a very sensitive time with everything that's going on. And I just want to tell them know where I'm at.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out, I mean, we was talking about a $75,000 shortfall if we did it at 64.92. But where are we gonna be at if we do it at 62.92? I mean, 62.92. That's gonna be at least a $200,000 difference from that and that tax rate.
What did we say, we had 189 or something?
Well,
Yeah.
plus 30, 184 plus 22 Renee. 10 to the sheriff's office, so looking at 230.
And Lynette, didn't you say that the fees were not figured in what you gave them?
Right,
And that's the ad valorem fees, right?
right.
Okay, well, if y'all look at your budget worksheet on the second,
In the book,
yeah.
It's the one I left the booth there.
Mhm.
Great, those are blue. There went my.
okay.
Okay, if you scroll down, well, not scrolling, but look down, and get the ad valorem fees, which is maybe a fourth of the way down, it's right under
Yeah.
chapter 19 funds.
300,000.
Always budget 300,000, and you can see what we collected so far this year, and what 29 we collected, and then 20. So that can help if you're not. It's in the budget, it's budgeted to figure that budget. But we always, her figures didn't include that, so you can add that to her figures.
300,000.
This how much was budgeted, but we
But
actually
it's
collected
actually
345,
More than.
so we
that.
were to the good.
I mean, and usually we do get more than that on things, but
And you don't want
I don't
to have
want
it
to,
so close that you fall short. That's what it causes.
I mean, because some of the things that were budgeted, they did fall short.
We've collected some delinquent fees too, delinquent taxes, I thought, over what we projected we would collect.
And then you have to also take into consideration, look on page 3 of the budget worksheet. If you go down to, housing and tolerance, the TCSO inmates, we budgeted 300,000. But in 2019, it went to 343. That is a number that's gonna fluctuate because it depends on if they're having cases, if they're, but you know, sometimes it's just
We're
like,
at 118 now, so,
right.
yeah, you're halfway, more than halfway through the year on this.
But see, if you look at the 2020 year, we stayed below it. That's what I'm saying. Some of this stuff you just don't know. I'm gonna use a phrase Terry Allen uses. You don't know what you don't know.
You know, one thing, we hadn't talked about the library and the different things. Was we gonna try to go with the same thing that we paid the library, or was Dave gonna request more for it to fund that?
I don't know, she's not here.
So we just trying to wait on it.
Either that or just stay and make no change, because that would be the exact same budget as what they've been using.
If y'all wanna go over this stuff that Leanne did on the step stuff, and look at it and discuss it a little bit.
I think we should, I mean, she went to the trouble to do it, so.
Well, thank you. Do me a favor.
That's the one employee.
Yes, it's my one. So the reason that I did this is, a couple of things. And you first of all need to understand that I am HR, and so what comes to me is through our employees. So I get to hear their legitimate, everyday concerns, their issues, what they can and cannot afford, and how they want to adjust their deductions and their electives in their check because of what they can and cannot afford. And some of that is by no fault of their own. And I realize that some of you would argue that we are benefit rich, or we are time off rich, or we are all of those kinds of things. However, I will say to you, you cannot eat those things. You cannot shop with those things. Those things are wonderful and they are great. But at this time and the climate and the economy that we are in, our Tyler County employees are Tyler County taxpayers, and they are constituents, and they are having the same problems that we're talking about sheltering everybody else from as well. And if we're going to talk about sheltering them, we need to shelter our people too. We need to help our people, and we need to figure out how to do that. And we need to do that responsibly and not break the bank and not just throw good money after bad and not just say, here's a quick fix, because here's what happens every year. Every year we get to budget talks and everybody says, are we going to get a raise? Are we going to get a raise? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And we say, well, let's do this, this, and this, and this. And then 9 times out of 10, we wind up not doing anything, or we throw something out there. And then at the end, or 2 years from now, we're still back in the same spot that we're in. So I sent you a proposal. Obviously, it's just my opinion. Stephen, we know how often people listen to the treasurer.
Yes.
So it obviously can be tweaked, it can be adjusted, but I do believe very, very strongly, based on the conversations that I have had with our employees, that something is better than nothing. They have to know that we appreciate what they've done. The average employee for Tyler County has worked for us for 11 years. There's obviously more, there's obviously less, but the average person has worked for the county for 11 years. That's unheard of in today's society. It truly, truly is. And I think that that's worth rewarding. I realize we have great benefits, but again, you can't take those benefits as a single mama to Walmart and ask them to charge that to your health insurance. So my proposal is that we look at some sort of step program that all of the federal government uses, the state uses it in a lot of things, and a lot of other counties actually use this kind of program as well. And what they do is, depending on, it's almost like the sheriff's department does certificate pay. It's kind of like that, except it's not state mandated. So it would be, I would work with the different offices and getting what the requirements would be for their office. We would take it to court, we would approve what would be accepted and what would not be. And based on that acceptance for the criteria and this baseline of years, it's not longevity, it's not to be confused with longevity, it's not to be tied into longevity, it's not to replace longevity. It is just to use that as a minimum criteria, which also can be adjusted to start out with to compensate our employees at this particular time in their career with the county as the official sees fit and as we've invested that money into these employees. And I think that that's one thing we need to understand too, is I would love to know the amount of money that we've invested in Dean Rivers in her 30 years that she's been here. She can't just go work at the clerk's office just because Donnie's hired her. Every year she has certifications and recertifications and requalifications time and time and time again that she has to do to be able to work in the office. The same thing with Melissa Carson. After 26 years, the money that the county has invested into these employees is astronomical. And so obviously Dean's not going to go in for 30 years. So to do that, I believe that this would be something to consider. So I've given you two options. One, obviously what I would guess consider a premium. And then the second option would be a lesser amount. And both are still good. Both are still something. But it also gives us something to discuss and something to let our people know that we hadn't forgotten and we appreciate what they're going through, because just like everybody else outside of county government, they've gone through a lot too, and they have dealt with COVID just like everybody else, and they have done without just like everybody else, and they are doing without just like everybody else. And so, again, they didn't come to me to complain. They didn't come to me to tattle. They didn't come to me to do all that. They come to me to figure out what they could live with and what they could take home to their families and make it work. And so it is my responsibility and my commission to come back to you and tell you that. And I know that these things are important to y'all. I know that. And I know that you'll do what you can do. I know that. I know that we have a great group of commissioners and judge. I know that. I'm just asking you to be open-minded about this and consider it seriously. What I do know about this court is if you want it bad enough, you'll find a way to make it happen. And your people want this, so find a way.
Thank you, Vivian. I know we've spent several years discussing it at this time of year, some way or another to separate from people that's been here 20 years and somebody that's been here one, that's making the same amount of money, other than the longevity check. It'd be nice if we had some kind of step plan to use.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I would look at it more on a department type level. Kind of like myself, been over to JP for 14 years, and then went to the sheriff's office for 6 years, and then the commissioner's office for two years. Well, I'm only a 2-year employee in my department, so I wouldn't qualify for this. That's just written right now until I hit the 5-year mark. I wouldn't get anything, even though I've been at the county and the longevity is taking care of that. But when I came to this department, I had to learn this department, so Joe was in this department and then got elected, so he didn't move departments, so he should be counted into that, I think. She's been at her department for 45 years, but she's only been elected for 35 of those years, right? But she should be counted as a 45-year department person, Not that we have 45 years of incentive here on this chart. But I don't want to take somebody's, if they're trying to change positions from wherever it's just a regular employee to a chief deputy type position, and maybe even to the elected position. I don't want to cut their time that their knowledge and their
Oh, we're in the same department.
Yeah, as long as you're in the same department, you carry those years with you, Unlike me that jumps around from place to place, I don't get anything because I jump around too much. But, and I mean, I would like to see something like that. And I know where I've heard complaints about it, that the first day person is making exactly what the person that's training them, that's been there for 35 years, knows, and they're making their base salary exactly the same amount of money, Now, I don't know if we could afford this or not. As far as giving some more money for training or a job or whatever, that's gonna take a lot more research and development, I think, other than just years or time at that department, And so and I don't know if it'd be merit paid or anything like that, but I wouldn't want somebody to say, oh, well, you're doing a better job than this person, so I'm gonna give you extra money, but this person over here has never had evaluations. They don't know what they're doing wrong, other than they're just not getting the money to people. And maybe that's not the way it's set up, but time at a department would be easy to figure, easy to decipher, with start date and count it from there.
Well, that was one of the things we always had trying to figure out how to, with each department, how you can do that.
Yeah.
If I could, it would probably be a series of meetings or workshops, and then with a rough draft that would come back to court.
Yeah.
And then based on that policy, somewhat like what we did with the sick leave, that policy would be adopted, and it would ensure that we're rewarding our employees for actual effort they put back in their job. I mean, you obviously don't want somebody that just doesn't care, that's there to drive, we've all had, well, not me, because I only had that one, but we've all had those employees that just kind of ride the skirt tails of somebody else, and they just are there and whatever. But then you've also had that same employee for the same amount of time that's worked and just gives everything every day. And so if they have all the certifications and they have all the criteria set by court, then they meet the five, whatever it is, that step one or step two or whatever.
I know when we talked about it earlier, and I didn't really totally look at all your plan, which I think it's a good idea, is we got a lot of them that are already that could be at the top.
Good.
I think, because we had talked about doing steps within,
Did you?
let the official, I haven't really studied it.
You know, you get broke down how many employees, you got how many years.
Yeah, and you also have about half of our employees that would get nothing
Until they were around more,
until they get to,
5 years.
a 5-year deal. So that's not helpful.
But it does help us stagger out the amount of money that the county is pushing out.
Yeah.
I
And
think-
if this was adopted, if this was adopted, it would just remain like this until we saw fit to
To
change,
adjust it,
to
yes.
change the numbers. Okay,
It's a constant, and the variable is
the age.
correct. And then also, it's gonna be adjustable
Years.
on the people that come in on the beginning, and it's gonna be adjustable on the people that retire on the end. So those two are gonna always, fluctuate.
In counter to your comment, Stephen, I'm thinking about an employee that had an opportunity to transfer from one official to another. They're being penalized because of the number of years from the time that they entered the work world, that they were under one official and then moved. And the reason I say that is because some years ago, we realized a percentage raise or a percentage increase is disproportionate. The ones on the bottom end get half or a third of what the ones that are on the higher pay scale of it. But yet everybody's still paying the same thing for gas, for food, and for medical services. And we went several different times, I think 3 different times, and just did a flat $2,000 across the board pay increase to every person, because we're all paying the same thing for everything. So you're moving us just the same level to everybody, regardless of how long they've been in that position.
In road and bridge department, I don't know, this probably doesn't have calculations for tax. So we'll have to-
That's what I'm figuring right.
And then also, overtime and all that's gonna go up.
And you have liability that you have to go through that.
Well, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Like I have one that transferred from one department to another.
That's what I was thinking of.
Well, she didn't lose no money for moving to that department. She kept the same amount of money. So how would it negatively affect them if they went from one office to another?
Because they would be penalized for the time that they worked under that one office, like Stephen was talking about. In how he's, say he was a JP.
But she wouldn't go down to she would stay at the level she
Yeah,
is.
she would stay.
So-
And then at that 5-year mark,
She gets,
work in that department. Oh, I think that's fair.
Well, because you're doing,
She don't really lose anything.
correct,
No, you don't
you're
really.
learning the
and
certifications
you
in
make
your
the
department.
choice to move to
Yes.
another department.
I
That's your
mean-
choice.
Yeah, exactly. If you're willing to accept that,
Correct.
the pay that you're receiving, you're gonna get it. But you're not gonna get another one until the next 5-year mark.
Not unless you're a 5-year employee and get it at that department. and then you go to another department, you're gonna take a cut.
But that's your
But that's
choice.
their
Yeah.
That's their choice.
We all have choices.
That's right, we have, and you know, so for some people, that choice may be a good thing for them.
But I don't think they're not taking a cut, they're just not using it.
Yeah, it's a step increase.
They're not taking a cut in pay.
No, they're just not getting a step increase until they're in the same department for 5 years.
Not messing with your pay, not messing with your base salary, not messing with your longevity, not messing with any of that. Just a $25 or $37.50 or $50, whatever we decide, addition to your check. That's it.
But I think, Leanne, the question was, if you move from that department to somewhere else, do you lose that increase?
You do because the training then, and that's what this is almost like cert pay. The training then for the department that you've moved to, it does no good.
That's-
So if a clerk in Donice's office goes to the tax office, well, she's got to start over.
learning all over again.
And so Lynette has to have training for that person, or I could-
Longevity stays, it's just.
longevity stays, all of that. It's just,
They didn't lose what they did at the time.
Correct.
Right. They just have to wait that.
Well, that's an incentive for them to stay.
That's right.
Well, now, Leanne,
It works that way.
the way I understand what you're saying is if you're making $31,805,
Mhm.
and you get this increase,
Mhm.
and then you move into another department within the county, you go back down to that 31,000 because you lose this pay increase, okay?
that particular detail would be worked out by court.
Okay.
That particular,
Choices.
but now to get to the next step,
Right. But I'm talking if you go, can you go backward?
I don't know at this point. That's something that would need to work out in court. In my mind, it would be no. I don't want to take anybody's money away. But at the same time, if you made the 5 years in Lynette's office and you decided to go to Donice's office, because we know nobody's going to be in mine. So if we did that, then you wouldn't lose that initial five years mark or that step one. But if you go to Donice's office, you start over at the beginning of your 5 years, and then we'd have to
In
see.
5 years before you get another one.
Correct.
Even though you don't have the training or the certification or the knowledge yet to do the job, I'm just asking, that's the.
Again, a court decision that I'm just,
So somebody that would have 5 years experience at Donice's office, the person coming from Lynette's office would make the same with them that they did on the first day, if they had 5 years at your office,
Which is what we're trying to avoid.
which is what we're trying to avoid.
They're overthinking it.
yeah,
Well,
this is, yeah.
Well,
Just a question.
yeah, no, my employee has a number of years. She makes some more than what the other ones make because of her service and
Longevity.
That's
number of
longevity, yeah,
years.
that's
Well,
longevity.
I mean, even as the years went by and we got raises and got stuff like that, she acquired that. And she doesn't make more than what my deputy does, but she does make a little bit more because she has been in the county for a number of years, where the others have not.
Yeah, some of that
So,
longevity got locked into those people that
Yeah.
you carry that with you always. It doesn't matter where, you're always
Right.
gonna have that
And so
longevity.
she has, and I mean, just because she come over to my size, she's not gonna be punished just because she switched offices. But now she'll have to, she's gonna scratch hard to try to get this next 5 year mark. And believe me, she's they don't understand when I tell them. You gonna work, They get the idea and after about 6 months to a year, they understand what I'm saying.
I think they're all still riding for the brand. They're all still working for the
Yes, yes,
company. They're all still part of the county.
yes.
You can have an official that can come along, and I'll just use my office for example. If there's a turnover, they might choose to not keep my support staff.
Right.
So she would have to find some other place, hopefully, within county government. No fault of her own.
No,
Something totally out. She's gonna get punished because she's been of service to the county and somebody didn't want to keep her whenever they took office.
right.
So I think that we have to be sensitive to those types of things and respect the fact that, people do make choices, but sometimes they don't.
Yes,
And
exactly.
that would have to be factored in there.
That's what I was thinking.
Can I say very much, Leanne, kudos to you for spending the time looking at this, because I know, just like Mike said, they have been talking about trying to figure out a fair and equitable way for a person that walks in the door not to be making the same thing as, I call it, the Dean River rule. But, so, I mean, it's just a step in the right direction, I think, to look at something like this.
I just think if we don't ever take a step forward, we're never going to, and then we're gonna be like Dean Rivers 30 years later being like, well, we talked about it one time.
How many employees have we had transferred from one department to another? I mean, it's not an overwhelming
Right.
amount. So
I'm probably the most active in that.
so we could leave their salary at whatever they're at when they transfer, and then, like I said, it'd be another 5 years possibly before they get another boost.
My observation is it takes about 2 years for
Yeah,
you to
we-
really get comfortable to work independently, but you still have, especially in our offices like we have, somebody that can sit there and come alongside you and answer questions that or anomalies that come up ever so often. You don't know it because you haven't had the experience. And, it's like first term in office, you find out everything you can't do. Second term, you find out what you can do. The third term, you figure out what you will do. And the fourth term, you're trying to fix what you have done. So it's a process, you're going through.
Write that down.
So the total liability, Jackie just figured is $59,275.75 for the top, the premium. Can you repeat that? $59,275.75.
Just round it, 60,000.
$60,000.
$5,000 a month.
Now the $1 million question is there enough money left over if we went with that no new tax rate? Considering, what we were talking about, having enough to cover that other deficit, but with this added there.
And if we do MISA, then that's an ongoing expense unless we eliminate it.
No.
And currently, we have 6 benefits, and if you consider the time off, that's gonna be 7. Hospitalization, Aflac, cell phone, vision, longevity, retirement. And there's position longevity, and then there's just longevity. We looked at that chart that Jackie gave us and broke that down.
But that's already figured into our budget. All of that is correct.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
But what I'm saying is, what does the position longevity mean versus longevity?
The position longevity, when we the reason we did that is when we gave the raise, those that were already getting longevity, we rolled it into their salary.
Like her person.
And so people coming in weren't making what she's making because that position longevity, meaning the longevity they already had, was figured in with their salary. I mean, we thought it was a good idea, and it was wonderful, but then when we went to post salaries, it was like, oh, wait a minute, we can't add that in there, because if a new official or new employee would come in, they wouldn't get what, and so that's where that came from. So the people that have been here the longest are the ones that have the position longevity. People coming in after we did that don't, because we haven't done that again.
That's like your person.
Yes, I think that's where her little bit comes from. Well, I say a little bit, but that's where that probably comes from.
So that's completely different than the regular longevity that they get added to each year.
I think what the court at that time referred to as like a loyalty. That person has been loyal to the county, we need to reward them in some way. They've been there for so many years to keep a brand new employee from making the same amount of money as this person's been here for 10 years, however long it's been on their longevity time.
And it makes sense.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, a person who's been in the clerk's office with, or any of these offices, and that can command these positions, to answer questions regardless of whether the official, regardless of whether the chief deputy's there. I mean, they can,
Right.
they have a greater value. Same thing in law enforcement. These guys are taking courses, they're going from basic to intermediate to master certifications, so their worth, if they go back out on the free market and offer themselves somewhere else, I mean, what they've acquired with their current employer is marketable at a higher rate. It just makes sense.
On our office and probably some of y'all's too, and we're now required to be certified in several aspects of our office, or we can't get into the state system. We have to have that training and certificate, or they, they won't let you into their system.
And it didn't used to be that.
They lock the password.
DMV started that this year. DMV, they all do master certified, else you can't get master class.
And
Ours is the Attorney General's office, the voter registration. Yeah.
so how long does it take for a new hire in either or any of y'all's offices to get to a place to where they start taking these certification trainings? Would they do that within that first year?
Yeah, they have to, or they couldn't issue a birth certificate, or they couldn't register anybody to vote, or
Here's how,
work in elections at all.
when we put the current veteran service officer in place over at the Veterans Visa, they had to go through a certain amount of training. And then they had to get to a place to where they had a certification. And we said, okay, you'll start here. After you've been here for so long, 90 days, if it works out, then we'll move you up to this amount. And then once you get the certification, then they can do every single thing that any veteran in Tyler County needs to be able to help them. But if they choose not to, then they're not as valuable. So it had an incentivized type of progression for them. And I see exactly what, y'all are saying. I mean, you hire a guy on your precincts that has never been on a maintainer before, how long does it take them to become proficient with, 12 or whatever numbers of levers that are there that move all of that stuff? I mean, it takes a while to get proficient without tearing stuff up and, so it makes sense. Same thing with an entry-level peace officer that comes to work for the county. They learn the county, they learn the protocol, they learn from the experiences that they've had, how to deal with something versus putting the county in a liability type of exposure. I wonder if that's maybe where the conversation can start from, but then matriculate to in this certification is the value. I'm concerned that if we penalize people, either because they have an interest in a different department, they feel like that they've maxed out their interest level.
I think we could tweak that up to where we wouldn't be penalized if somebody would transfer. I don't think we have that many people that do.
We don't, but it's still there. And again, Mike, whether it's their fault by choice or whether it's not their fault by turnover, of the official.
That would have a little bearing on the other thing too, in the city. I mean, somebody that's been working for the county in one office, and say their offices, I know they don't do exactly the same work. I mean, it's similar work. It's not like somebody coming, just getting out of high school that hadn't done any of it and have to be trained completely, they would have a little understanding of it. So they might not have to wait 5 years to be able to get one, that step raise, maybe a year if they've already been in employment for 5 years. Something, there's different ways we could do it, I think, to make it work.
Yeah, and you could have, especially in jobs that are related, like the clerk or whatever, you could have level 1, 2, 3 clerk or whatever it would be. And, depending on that, if you're gonna hire somebody out of Renee, say, I'll bring them in as a level 2, then in 5 years, even though they might be a level 3 there. I know, that's what I'm talking about here. But you could give that option to that person, if they're gonna be something what to use, I'll bring then after 5 years, we'll bump you up.
My new hire,
The
You might already be
treasurer, the
with-
treasurer would like to speak.
I sent you a message. My
Oh.
potential new hire that you're gonna give me, upwards of $50,000, you know, the judge said.
Yeah.
So I'll trade my new hire for, I'll take one for the team. I'll trade my new hire for this step program. It's an easy swap.
So if we do
Gosh,
this,
we're all given so much.
I know.
if we do this, are you going to start this time today? Or are you going to?
That's the big first of the year.
It'll be
No, I'm
20.
talking about departmental time, or are you gonna give it to the person that, myself, for example, so I got 23 years or whatever it is.
What would happen is between now and January 1st, we would figure out what the criteria was. But I would.
But it would be a
call-
huge amount of money difference if you
Well,
want to include everybody.
Correct, and that's what I was about to say. If we are not careful and we start making adjustments for 1 year or in between,
Yeah.
then it will affect the bottom line. It is strategically placed to be a step and not an every step. It is a
Because
five,
that's one of those things, just like this position longevity. It sounded like a great idea at the time,
Or
but
keep
all
up
it
with
did was give me hell
Right.
having to figure because people would get their longevity check and say, yes, but I said hell.
And I
Get
cringe.
their longevity check and say it's not right.
Yeah.
Because they were expecting that position longevity to be tacked on to their regular longevity check. So this way and no deviation
correct.
is clean and clear where people can understand and they'll know, they can look at this chart and know when and
Their
where.
expectations. But between now and January, before it took place, if you all decided that that was the right thing to do, you found the money, which I just gave it to you, but if you found it, we would find the criteria, bring it to court, it would be voted on, and it would be definite. There would be no deviation from that. It can't, because it will adjust the money. And if you adjust the money, then there's no point. You might as well just do what you do.
And I guess my question is, am I gonna be included in the 23-year time? Or am I
Depends on what
included-
court decides.
Because if you're including me in the 23-year time, there's-
He's gonna do it.
no.
No, he's the one that's
I'm-
adjusting my part. So the difference would be, at that suggestion, I took Joe out. There will be some deviations because I took Joe out because he was new in his position when I should not have.
Right.
So Joe would go back to his original time and I should have done that. So
Right. I would
you
not be
though,
far.
you're back there with me
That's right. I would be far, however long you've been in the department.
in the same department.
Now, so however long your
So like
employees have
Renee
been there, they
Would go
they
back
would
to
count
hers.
it, yes.
Renee would go back to hers. Joe would go back to hers. You and I would be at the nothingness.
That's right.
Correct.
You worked for me for 7 years.
I did, but I quit and then
She did?
Almost 8.
Both of this being listed employees that you
Uh-huh.
got, and then all new would be,
Yeah.
you know, if you transfer after this day, you know.
Yeah.
you're transfer.
I mean, at this, January 1st, 2022, if you transfer, you've lost your time. You start over.
No, what I'm saying is it's grandfather that is,
Right.
and then every new person, if they did 3 years at the county clerk's office, at the district clerk, 2 years, they can get the 5 years.
So and I like that, but I think what we should do is between now and then, every official that is responsible for employees, even me,
The thing we're going to decide is money now. That's your problem. That's, come on.
the money needs to stay at $60,000.
Is that enough for me to get?
No, you're back there with me. You get nothing, Stephen.
Dan, while I was out, did you say that y'all found the money?
I was being sarcastic.
Well, yeah.
I was being sarcastic.
Oh, that was sarcasm?
She was gonna give up her new position that
She
she
said I thought she really had her position. Well, I guess I voted on that though. Well, can I say something? I hadn't got to say a word because Stephen won't be quiet.
That's right.
I think it's a good idea, and I guess I can support it. But what worries me about it, and I know we hadn't heard anything yet from Jackie about the one-time thing, but what worries me about this is, you've made your spill about the people hurting and all like that, but you're gonna have 50-something people that aren't gonna get anything. And I don't think that's gonna stop them from not needing to buy more groceries or a little more gas or anything like that. And I know there's a plan, but in 5 years, they may have starved to death. So, I mean, I think this is a good idea, but it's leaving half of our employees cold dry with nothing.
Not sure if we can afford to give everybody that.
Well, I mean,
And that's-
I'm not saying we can, I'm just saying that I think it's gonna leave a very bad taste in the other 50-something people.
See, that kind of goes back to where we've always run up against the stump.
Yeah.
We don't do it
And
because
treating
it's going to affect.
Employees different.
Well, but you can, and not everybody deserves a trophy.
Well, yeah,
Well-
that's the whole point. Just because you playing in the game doesn't mean that you always gonna get the cream of the crop. You gotta start at the bottom.
Right.
That's the way the world works
And
nowadays.
that's the way it works.
The people who
I
are
mean,
getting this are people that have already been here.
Right.
So,
But that's not addressing all the other people that
Needs.
would like a raise too, and the needs they have.
But this isn't necessarily, I mean, it is increasing your pay, but it is increasing your pay based on something that you've done. And once you've done that, once you've accomplished that, then your pay is increased. It's not just because you work here, it's because you contributed something else, you put
You've
forth
accomplished
effort.
this.
Okay, but you take like my guys, okay? All of those that are considered to be operators,
Okay.
whatever, they all make the same thing.
Okay.
There is, as far as I know, I mean, I guess I could get on the computer and make one and give them a little test or whatever. But as far as I know, there's no
Standardized.
standardized certificate for driving a grader or a maintainer, whatever you want to call it. Now, I made it a requirement that they have to have their CDL A and B now before I would hire anybody else. So that would be one thing that you could call a certificate or whatever, but as far as all the rest of the things they do, I mean, I guess you could have a welding certificate or whatever, but I mean, I don't know of any certificate for mowing with a side boom brush hog.
Well,
I
do
mean,
they know
But
CPR?
why do you make them have those two things?
because they have to drive trucks.
That's right. They have to be able to do the
Mhm.
job. And if they don't have those and they wanna work for the county, then they're gonna put out an investment into their own future to do that.
That's true.
That's a plus to them.
I think
And
we,
then, when they've been here 5 years, hey, if I stay here 5 years,
You deserve something.
I'm gonna
A
get
reward.
another pat on the back. And if I'm, that's a goal,
Incentive.
an incentive to be a part of the county and to work for it. I don't think that it's, well, you've come to work for us and you haven't really done a whole lot there. You've not learned a whole lot, you've not put out a whole lot. And I don't think you ought to evaluate everybody that comes into the office because it's just like, yes, they doing the job, they gotta go. Because you can't hang on to them forever, because you can't do dead weight.
Yeah.
You gotta move on along.
Well,
Life's
moving
hard.
her department.
But it's just, it's life. You work for it, you put into it what you get out of it.
That's right.
That's true. I agree.
I think for so many years, my experience is we've tried to commingle 3 separate categories of county functions. You got law enforcement. And under law enforcement, you've got patrol, you got dispatch, and you got jail. Then you have road and bridge. And it's got a basic skill set, an advanced skill set, and then you've got all of the offices that basically process documents that the public has no other choice to come to. They gotta come to us. We have no competition. And we have to deliver that because we're the only game in town. And we've tried to commingle the value of the different skill sets in each of these 3 categories. And when I saw that several years ago, it's like, why do we keep confusing this conversation? You know, you've got people that go back to school and think about the ones that were athletes, and then the ones that were in UIL events that were not athletic, and then the ones that just were there to get their studies. I mean, they're all just as valuable, but their interests and their skill set and their contribution provided it for 3 different types of categories. So I'm concerned that we are having a conversation that's commingling skills that vary
Right.
from group to group.
I don't think it's anything that can be decided today other than the money. I think that the format has to be decided on, and that gives you your money. And then the meat and potatoes of it is decided between now and January, and then that's how you figure out what actual criteria is. And to your point, I agree with you. There's a law enforcement side of it, there's a road and bridge side of it, and then there's a clerical side of it, because not everybody sees the value in everybody else's office. And so, and the value comes from me as the supervisor or the official, as it does to y'all. And so I think that that's what needs to be established today. My opinion.
That's mine.
Well, my predecessor had this line, and he says, well, who's gonna pay for this? And ultimately, the taxpayer, because we don't have a grant that underwrites it, we don't have, it's gonna be your neighbors, it's gonna be, and I get it, Leanne. I mean, my taxes are going up, your taxes are going up, but I'm a direct beneficiary, as we all are, of the collective whole, who's not getting anything back through the county monies. So I think we're faced with a decision of 3 out of this 5 is gonna say, yeah, we will, or no, we won't.
And because they're not getting anything out of it, our office, like in Donisa's office, you know, if you lose your deed, where are you gonna go? It's a permanent record, so it's not like we're just getting money just to be able to get it. We are providing a service.
And we're collecting a fee for certain services that the law allows us to. And that's going into the base of the revenue stream that's helping to underwrite the cost of it. But to the point that was made a little bit earlier by Trish, you know, when the governor arbitrarily started sending DPS troopers, we lost half of the presence of DPS troopers in this county on a continuous basis, because they'd rotate in for 2 weeks and they'd rotate out for 2 weeks. And so every bit of that we had no control over, yet we had an effect by it.
Well, I like
Well, I
the
appreciate that.
idea of it. You know, like I said, we've been trying to figure out for years how we can do something that would be fair.
Right.
Around 50,000 or 60,000, is that right?
60.
Yeah.
I'll copy it.
For the premium side of it, if you decided to go to the lower side. And again, here's the beauty of this. There is no more, everybody needs a raise, and let's come back to court and deal with this every year. It takes
Sure.
care of itself. The beauty of this is that we've got a raise plan already in place. We don't have to deal with this anymore.
But we have to fund it.
We do have to fund it, but we have to fund everything. But here's the thing, whether we vote on this or not, whether we say we want to help this situation or not, whatever we do, the cost of living is still going up, regardless of what we do in here today, or what you guys vote. And do I want a dedicated employee, or do I want somebody that's having to work a part-time job and my job? And you said that at the beginning when you started work and people were at 429 rushing out to go work at Walmart because of the pay of the courthouse. Just because that happened then and we gave some people some raises, and times have changed. What was relevant 5 years ago is not relevant today. People cannot afford things today because, like Trish said the other day, a thing of orange juice is $8.99. True story. When you can't afford the toilet paper for whatever reason, you got to figure out how to do it. And even though we've been here on average 11 years, if I can't provide for my family, and I love the county and that's great, but if at the end of the day I still can't provide for my family, I need to figure out where I can go. And the benefits are great and that is wonderful, but at the end of the day, I still gotta figure out how to provide for my family. And that has become more and more prevalent and more relevant, an issue today than it was 5 or 10 years ago. And yes, we have to pay for it, but this is a business. And in a business, you have to do whatever it takes to make the business successful. And the biggest investment that we have in this business is our people. We have to invest back in our people.
And I'll tell you, if you go to work at Walmart after work, people will harass you. Because I did several years ago when I was working for Donnie's, I did when Josh was in college. I would leave the county and go work at Walmart, and then they would come through my line and say, "What are you doing working here? They don't pay you enough?" And I'm like, first of all, it ain't none of your business, is what I wanted to say, but
No, I bet you.
yeah,
the
people
same one
do
there.
harass you when you try to do something different.
Do we have intentions of trying to wrap this workshop up today, or we want to do some more?
So what is the process on coming down to a tax rate on this? I mean, we're gonna have to vote on all this, of course, we can't do that today for a workshop. Do we vote on the proposed tax rate, Jackie, and then
Look at
post that
your
proposed?
calendar for this Senate, yeah, that's a next question.
Yeah, it's all lined out, you gotta do it on the timeline.
Yeah, it's that,
Meeting to vote
Right after this, yeah, there.
and then plan your meeting to.
I've heard so much different seminars about it.
Yeah. But you have a meeting to propose.
When we put the fire, how long
Schedule the meeting or hearing, whichever you're gonna
Do
do.
we do that?
A hearing if you go above. It's like 3 something already.
Yeah, that's why I was asking if we plan on coming back.
You're just gonna say the no new revenue, it's a meeting to.
We have a
adopt.
public hearing when you.
Digest
Go
it.
to-
Okay.
do that. If not, it's still a meeting to adopt it, but there's that 7-day criteria before the meeting, the paper things, without the paper, you can't have a meeting sooner than 7 days. And everything has to be done by September 30th.
Well,
We have plenty of
you have
meetings
to
scheduled
look
between
at
now and
the
September 30th, you know. so,
salary stuff, you gotta be able, it must be published 10 days before a meeting. When, is this the one that has to be a regular meeting on that?
I think so.
That's why we.
That's why we have all those regular meetings
Regular
scheduled.
meetings at the beginning of the year.
So starting on the 30th, right, we start having regular meetings.
August 30th.
August 30th, September 7th, September 13th, September 20th, and September
They're already
26th.
posted as a regular.
They're all regular meetings that
Well,
we
they're not
schedule.
posted yet, but.
Yeah,
Yeah, we got them on the schedule.
They're on the schedule.
yeah, they're on the schedule. That's regular meetings. So we, starting the 30th, we'll start having regular meetings once a
Yeah.
week.
So,
The notice.
have y'all
7
decided on a tax rate? Are y'all gonna stay with the no new tax rate, or?
Well, that's what we do. We can't decide that in here. We have to have that at a
We
regular.
have to.
Well, we can't vote on that in here because we're in a
No.
workshop. We're not in a meeting.
We can have
So I don't know, do we need to have a meeting to have a proposed
Have another
tax
meeting.
rate?
Yes,
Well, you can't do a workshop, it has to have a meeting.
it has to be a meeting and you take a vote on your proposed, because that is on the notice. Who voted for and against.
Right, all that's, yeah. Who's
Why
for,
don't we-
who's against.
Let's have us another workshop scheduled, and we can have the meeting right after it scheduled, you know, or whatever, so we can have another discussion about it, and have a little more time to study and read over this stuff, and then go from there.
So does that meeting where we vote on the proposed tax rate, does that have to be a regular meeting?
Yes.
So our next regular meeting is August the 30th.
23rd.
The 23rd?
I think. So,
I don't have it on the 23rd.
we have to schedule it.
30th. Okay.
I have it on the 23rd,
Okay.
11.
So we have enough time to post that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good thing.
Yeah, we could have a workshop before that to talk about it, but we can have one before then, it's not a clean.
Well, you probably need to have it sooner than later, so for all this
We
stuff.
won't forget what to go over.
So we
all
don't
that.
have to start at ground zero
Refresh, yeah.
again and blast off.
Judge, what's your schedule look like next week?
County court has been canceled on Monday, so that's open. I have,
Monday's not good.
a,
That was my
We don't have time for Monday.
we don't have time for Monday?
It's Friday.
That's right.
Today's Friday.
Yeah.
Unless
So
we wanna
whole
have
Friday
it
going.
at 4 o'clock. Yeah, no.
I have
No.
a, 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock
Tuesday.
schedule, Tuesday.
What
And
that
then
is.
I have probate court on Wednesday.
Good.
It's not gonna be extensive, it looks like it's gonna be a couple of hours.
Do it after lunch, maybe, whatever.
What time is the probate court start?
It starts at 9.
Wednesday.
We need to get with Trish.
Wednesday.
What?
about I have to follow up doctor's appointment.
They give enough time to post the agenda. I guess we got to do it Friday morning for the Monday court.
There are all time.
Workshop.
Yes, but we need
Have
to,
it
for
there.
the workshop, anything that we need to, we need to have time to put on the regular court agenda for the 23rd. But we have them for Friday at 11
I can't
a.m.
imagine a woman.
Yeah, so we'll have time to do it on Thursday.
Could we do it Wednesday after lunch? Would that be something?
I'm available.
Work.
Would you be
Probate
available
court's
by
just that
me?
morning. Isn't that right, Bonnie?
Yeah.
Yes, sir,
My
the last
appointment's
one
at
is
about
August
9:45.
10:30.
So we could do it at 1 o'clock or 1:30 on
We
Wednesday?
need that check in here.
Yes, we need to check the
What day is that?
1:30 on Wednesday.
Ask her about the 23rd too.
18. And what time was it?
1:30.
Where is Hector, Texas?
Extra.
There's an
E-C-T,
Ector County, I know, but. that doesn't mean it's Ector
E-C-T-O-R, Texas.
It's a county.
Really? Wonder who knows
Is
me
it a
there?
city?
It says Hector, Texas, E-C-T-O-R.
No, that's a car warranty.
I was gonna
Don't
say-
answer it.
Somebody trying to tell you.
Maybe-
Somebody's
Somebody
active
call me from
computer.
there.
The 18th is not available.
City of Victor.
The 19th is available Thursday.
Thursday?
It's in
Thursday.
Fannin County.
The Thursday at 1:30?
Yeah,
Where's
can we do
Fannin
Thursday,
County?
Judge?
North or
Let's see, I think so. We've got juvenile probate, I mean
Oh.
Uh,
juvenile,
We do. At noon? Is it
at
at
noon,
noon?
yeah, but it usually doesn't last.
It should take.
What about the court?
The answer is yes.
Okay, let's do it Thursday then.
Thursday.
1:30.
1:30. Write it down.
Dad, when you've been married so long, you forget it.
Better not.
I never forget those special days.
This is gonna be 33 years.
Such a peach.
Huh?
I hear you such a
I'll-
peach.
I'll
I
just
know,
put it-
well, I saw some pretty pictures yesterday.
33 years.
Should be, because next May I'll be 30.
Thomas Fowler wants
You
your
let
phone
me
number.
be a
Should I give it to
workshop,
him?
call me. For this matter.
Are you talking with the guy that wants to put in an RV park at Annual? Okay, so, because he did email me and wanted me to give a commissioner number. You already got it?
He's got it, yeah, he's got it.
So Thursday at 1:30 in here.
Mhm. Then we can discuss the premium pay stuff there and I think we'll have a better idea of what we're gonna do.
Oh.
So we through?
I think so. Do we need a motion
We
to
have to
adjourn?
have a
Second.
motion.
And there's a motion, second, all in favor, right?
Aye.
Okay. We are adjourned.
Oh, he loves that. He loves that way too much.
Big contract, no.
I've never